Hello, 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 everyone. This is Tanika Steens, and I am your host for Mind Your Business, Mindful Intentions, Nurture and Drive Your Business. And today, my guest is Charlene Madden. She has admittedly spent most of her life living in a state of darkness. After experiencing over 9 years of sexualized trauma at the hands of her grandfather, a decade of domestic violence, and three plus decades of mental illness and suicide ideology, she was 2 days away from taking her life when she attended a woman's workshop where everything changed. She was able to take um, she was able to take off her blinders, begin the healing process, and find her purpose. By beginning the journey to true self love, she was able to create a shift in her life. Within a year of deciding to live, she published a book, met and married the man of her dreams, and embraced the life she had chosen by turning her mess into a message of hope, evolution, and transformation that she now shares with women all over the world through speaking, personal coaching, and creating and hosting the Ignite Your Life Women's Empowerment Workshop. I'm so excited to have her here today. She is going to spend her time this morning talking to us about her transformation story and how she was able to turn that mess into a message and help empower someone today that might be in a similar situation. Charlene, welcome to Mind Your Business. Please share with us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and exactly why you do it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I hope that something that I share today can reach someone who needs to hear the message and that they can find the hope that they're so desperately searching for. As you said, my name is Charlene Madden. I am a women's empowerment coach. I am a Reiki practitioner, and I am the creator and founder of Ignite Your Life workshops in British Columbia, Canada. Um, I developed this workshop and started coaching because I knew the impact that it could have on people's lives, on women's lives. And I know that impact firsthand because I was a person who was in a really dark place just over 5 years ago. And it kind of started back to my upbringing, as you kind of touched on. I was born into a pretty dysfunctional household as a child. uh, my father was a severe violent alcoholic, and at the age of 3, my parents separated, and my mother took my older brothers, and my sister and I were left with my father. And of course, being a severe alcoholic, he was in no position to care for two young girls. So he contacted my grandparents and asked if they would take us in. And my grandmother, without missing a beat, said, "Yes, of course, I would love to take the girls in. We'll care for them." And she was just an absolutely amazing woman, super strong. I always said she was really far ahead of her time. She believed that women should be strong, independent, get a good education, and look after themselves because we couldn't depend on men in her world. So I learned a lot from her, and I probably learned those lessons far too well. My grandfather, on the other hand, as you said, was a pedophile, and my sister and I went through 9 years of sexualized trauma from my grandfather until it all came out. So it came out. My grandparents divorced. At this time, I'm just going into high school, so I am dealing with the stigma of being a victim of childhood abuse at the hands of my grandfather, coming from a broken home. And I'm becoming a teenager, so I'm dealing with all these hormones and emotions that come with it, as that is just natural. And I lived in a small town, so it was kind of everybody knew about it. So it wasn't like you could just blend in. You couldn't hide from it. So I went into high school and started suffering from depression and suicidal ideologies. I started cutting at a young age, and one of my releases was writing. I always said that I poured ink out onto pages rather than blood out from my skin because to me at that time it was one of the two. But being as I wrote a lot, it was a lot of dark topics, of course, a lot of suicide talk and the abuse talk, and of course, this is a red flag for any teacher. So I was brought into the school counselor's office, and they brought in a school psychologist, and an assessment was done on me, and I remember um, being diagnosed as manic depressive bipolar. Now I'm like 15 at this time. I have no idea what any of that means. It just to me means that I'm crazy, which I already felt at the time anyway. And going back to the abuse, when the abuse came out and social services got involved, I remember sitting in the office of the social worker's office and having her pat me on the back. I'm 12, and she's patting me on the back and she's telling me, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." And at the time, I didn't feel like anything was going to be okay. So fast forward, here I am sitting in the school psychologist's office, and she pats me on the back and says, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." And I was shuffled out the door. Neither of those people did any follow-up. There was no counseling. There was no, therapy sessions, anything. It was just a pat on the back and you're gonna be okay. And I really wanted to believe that as a kid, but I didn't feel it deep down inside. So I managed to get through high school and I move away because I think, if I move away, everything is going to be better because we have this ideology that geography makes all the difference in our life. And it doesn't. And I moved away with my high school sweetheart, who I ended up marrying and having three absolutely amazing children with. But didn't matter where I went, there I was. I was still dealing with all of these emotions and issues that I had never really done any work on. So when I was 28, I basically had a nervous breakdown. I was extremely suicidal, and I knew that if I didn't make a change, my children were going to come home and find me dead. I was already making the plans on how to do it. So I left my house because I knew at that time I was not fit to be taking care of anybody because I wasn't even taking care of myself, and left that relationship. And a month later, jumped into another relationship because I just wanted to be with someone and be loved and be valued because I didn't value or love myself. So that relationship went for 13 and a half years, and it was extremely, again, extremely dysfunctional. We were two dysfunctional people that got together. He suffered from mental health issues as well, was extremely violent. We were both extreme alcoholics, drank a lot. For me, it was just a way to numb all of these emotions I didn't want to feel. And after one bout of abuse, he had left the house, and I'm, laying on the floor, and I just was like, I can't do this anymore. And I went to the bathroom and opened up the medicine cabinet and emptied out all of the medication that was in there. There's a lot of painkillers. He had a back injury, and I took all the painkillers and went and sat on the couch and started to write my goodbye letter to my kids. And as I'm sitting there writing this letter, it hits me that I'm abandoning my kids just like my parents had done to me. And I couldn't do that at that time. And so I jumped in a taxi and went to the emergency room, and I was sitting in at the admissions desk when I collapsed, and I woke up with tubes down my throat. And my mother had been, notified that what had happened, that I was in the hospital. So she reached out and said, "I think maybe you need to move, uh, take the kids, bring them out here. We'll help you make a fresh start." And of course, this is my pattern, right? Like, let's just run because that's going to make a difference. And so I packed my kids up. I moved across the country and started over. Unfortunately, the partner I'd been in the relationship with decided to move as well. And, I'm always the ever hopeful person, thought, okay, this will be different this time. And of course, it wasn't. And it was only, at the end of that 13 years, we separated, and it was about 2.5 months after we had separated that a police officer showed up at my place of work. And this was a police officer that had been involved in one of our domestic disputes. And he, asked me to step outside, and he informed me that my ex partner had taken his own life. And of course, I was crushed. As many women who are victims of domestic violence, we have this loyalty and love to the partner, even though they've, all of the pain and heartache that they inflict on us. So I was absolutely crushed. And he had raised my children for 13 and a half years. So I was now going to have to go and tell my kids what had happened. And took, um, it took a couple weeks, but I started to get really angry. And I remember, all my friends and coworkers going, "It's okay. Like anger is part of one of the stages of grief." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. I'm not angry that he took his life. I'm angry that he did it first." Because at that moment, here I am, I'm left picking up pieces. I see the heartache, I see the pain, and I go, "How can I do this knowing how much it's going to hurt everybody else?" So I was really resentful of that fact. So I had guilt of, maybe some of his death was my responsibility. I'm angry. So, of course, I'm just trying to bury these emotions because, again, I don't know. I don't have the skills. I don't have the tools to deal with any of it. So I just keep burying it. And we do that as women constantly. And what happens is you can only bury it for so long and it always comes back to the
Mhm.
surface. Um, and that's what happened to me. It was about a year after his death. Um, I had received a life insurance policy. So this was, I was able to start making plans for my future, which I knew wasn't going to be very long, but I was thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a house because I can leave this for my kids because that's all I'm going to be able to do is leave my kids a house. That's the only thing of value I have to offer to my children because I didn't feel I had value to anybody. I was seeing a psychiatrist at this time, and I remember her being so excited about me getting this house because, here I am making plans for the future, she thought. And I'm thinking, you have no clue. Like, my future is like so limited. Like, I got the keys to the house in September, and I had made plans to take my life in October. And moved into the house, and I had a friend, a coworker who was attending this women's workshop, and she said, "Please come with me. I don't want to go by myself." And I was like, I'm always there for other people, and I was like, "This is the last place I want to go," because this was 2 days before the date that I had selected. And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll just keep pretending, because when you're suffering from mental illness and all, you're so good at having that mask. You can just no one, that's the problem. No one knows what you're going through because we have learned to just keep it hidden from anybody. So I went to this women's workshop and I remember walking in and feeling almost sick to my stomach because I felt so out of place. I was like, "Why am I here?" I'm watching all these women walk around and they're talking excitedly about their futures and everything they have planned and what they're going to do. And I'm thinking, I don't belong here. It just seemed to reinforce that I wasn't going to fit in. That I was like, "You guys are excited about your future. I'm just excited to get through 2 days so I can end this, so the pain can go away." But I sat there and, the first speaker comes up and they're talking about finances. And I'm like, "Yeah, well, that doesn't apply to me because it's not going to matter to me." And speaker gets up and they're talking about health and wellness. And again, I'm like, "Yeah, it doesn't matter to me." Right. And then a lady gets on stage and she was bald because she suffered from alopecia. And I kind of sit up in my seat and, because she's different and I'm always, kind of connected with different. And she starts talking about self-love and all the struggles that she went through and how much her life had changed when she learned to love herself. And I just heard this kind of voice in the back of my head. And it was quiet, but I heard it. And it kind of said, "What about you?" And I'm processing and I'm thinking, how different would my life be if I loved me instead of needing that validation and everyone else to love me because I'd never received it as a child or felt I hadn't received it enough as a child. What if I loved me? And I kind of brushed that away. And next speaker comes up and she starts talking about living with mental illness and how 20 years she had suffered and she had finally accepted that this was part of her life and how she had moved forward and lived with it instead of trying to fight against it. And again, I'm hearing that little voice in the back of my head, and it's like, hey, what about you? It's a little louder this time. And I'm like, yeah, what if I could learn to live with this? Like, how different would it be instead of being ashamed of it, of trying to hide it? What if I embraced it as being part of me and loving me? Now I'm combining those two subjects together. Then the last speaker gets up, and his name is Jared Morrison, and he starts talking about how he had lived with mental illness, how he had lived with addiction. So I'm like leaning in because this now I'm feeling like this is connecting, and how he had struggled. He'd been working for a year prior to find a perfect mix of alcohol and pain medication so that he could take his life but make it look like an accident because he sold life insurance. And he knew if it was suicide, his kids would get nothing. And it happened that one night he actually got, overnight visitation with his kids, which he wasn't allowed to have. And it was on that night that he found, finally, after trying for a year, he found the perfect combination of pain meds and alcohol. And he was laying on the couch and he knew he was overdosing and he knew he was about to die. And he heard a little voice in his head that said, no, not right, not like this. This is not how it's meant to go. And he's thinking about his kids and he's like, no, there's more to it than this. He calls 911. His life is saved. And he realized that he could actually take everything he's gone through. He got clean and sober, he got help, and now he was taking everything he'd gone through and he was sharing his story in order to help other people who were just like him. And I can hear that voice in the back of my head, and it is yelling at me now. And it is going, what about you? And I get goosebumps every time I say that. And it was in that moment that everything changed. It was like all of those three speakers had been there just to speak to me. That I recognized that, you know what, I could love myself. I didn't need that from anybody else. Just loving myself enough was going to be enough. That I could embrace my mental illness and instead of trying to fight it, accept that it's part of me and love that part of me and show that part of me grace. And then I could take this mess that I had experienced in my life. I could share my stories of sexualized abuse. I could share my stories of mental health struggles. And I could share it to other people who were feeling just like me and didn't feel like they were hope. I wanted to reach the person that was just like me sitting in that seat. So I made the choice that day to live and not just live, but to thrive and to go out and, like I said, turn that mess into my message. And I remember going up and speaking to the organizer of the event afterwards and saying, you don't know how much this event has impacted my life, but I would like to share it with you one day. And she's like, oh, okay. So she put a call out for speakers at the event for her next event. And I reached out and I said, I would like to share my story because your event saved my life. And she's like, okay. So she interviews me. And I said, when I showed up at that workshop, I had a hunting rifle in the back seat of my car. That was on a Saturday. Monday morning, because who likes Mondays? Not me. I was going to drive to the same location that my ex partner went to. I was going to shoot myself, just like my ex partner had, and I was going to end my life. But your event changed everything. And I said, and I want to let other women know that if they're open, their life can be changed too. So I spoke at that event, and I've always said that if I could save one life other than my own, if I could save one life, everything I went through would be worth it. And I remember getting off stage after I spoke at that first event, and I had a lady come up to me and she said, you know how you said you wanted to save a life? You did today. And she turned and walked away. And I was like, it was all worth it. Everything was worth it. So I went from that event. I published a book of poetry that I had been, this is all the pain and heartache that I had that I had poured out. I put it out there. I was like, I need to just purge this. I need to put it out there for the world to to read, for someone who may be experiencing the same thing. They may connect. I started to stop letting fear control my life. I was always afraid of rejection. I asked someone out on a date. I had to write a list of 6 things I wanted to try to, step out of my comfort zone to do. So I asked a gentleman out for a date. Our first date was in December. We got married the next August, and I started doing speaking so that I could reach out there and create impact. And now I'm blessed to be able to take my story and share it with different podcasts and put the message out there that number one, love yourself. That's the number one key how you can create a change in your life. And ask yourself, what would someone do who loves themselves today? What can I do to show myself love? And pour the same love into yourself that you show to everybody else, and your life will change drastically.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing. Sometimes it's so hard to step outside of ourselves because we don't think that anyone understands. And there are so many people going through the same thing that can so relate. And you thinking you were going to this event with your friend to be there with her was actually for you. And I always look at it, God knows what we need when we don't need it. And
Absolutely.
He will put us in a place that is uncomfortable so that we can be brought to where we need to be. And by you being there, those first two people, you felt like, oh, what am I doing here, whatever. But that was to get you prepared for what was to come. And then He grabbed your attention and had you right where He wanted you to be so that He could bring you to where you are now. And so that's wonderful. And what I love about this is the fact that you were bold enough to go let the woman, the organizer, know that this event changed your life. And I'm grateful that she wasn't like the ones in the past that just was like, oh, it's going to be okay, and then turned you away, because that could have been another nail in the coffin. But
Absolutely.
instead, this was the actual turning point for you to bring you to that point of, see, it is going to be okay.
Hmm.
You just have to hold on for one more day. And so, what I got out of this is, often we fail to plan, but you sat there and planned your whole death out. And because you planned your death out, you're actually setting your life up.
Yeah.
And we don't get that. You were planning your life. You thought you were planning your death, and what you actually were doing was planning your life.
Hmm.
And that is beautiful. So, when was this? How long ago did this take place?
The first workshop was 2016. So I attended the workshop in 2016, and I spoke at the event in 2017. So yeah. So it was between the 2016, 2017 that I published the book, and everything started to fall into place. And it's funny, the one thing I always said is purpose is so important, because when you feel like you have no purpose, you have no hope. And for me, it was understanding that there was a purpose to everything. That maybe, at the time when we're in it, we don't understand it. But when we get through it and we get to the other side, we see what the purpose was of every event that happened. And, like I always tell everybody, my track record for getting through crappy days is 100%, right? Because, and that's the message. It's like, just get through one day. One day. That's all you got to get through, is get through today. Because if you can get through today, you can get through tomorrow. And I know it
Absolutely.
seems really hard when you're in it, but we can do all things, right? If we just put faith in ourselves and into something higher, and understand that we're going through this for a reason. And we may not understand it at the time, but again, everything, I look at that, everything I went through was for a reason. And that reason was so that I can go out and I can create a ministry that serves into women. and lets them know that number one, if you were a victim, I hate the word victim, if you were a victim of child abuse or domestic abuse, it doesn't define you. And I think that's, because we let our experiences define us. And these are just events that happen. They aren't
Yeah.
who we are. And if it happened, okay, let's look for where we can move that forward and do something with it. And for me, working on trying to um, shatter the stigmas of mental health, again, because it's come so far. We have come so far with mental health, but we still have so much further to
Yeah.
go, and
Absolutely.
especially in men's mental health. Losing the partner, the ex-partner to suicide, I realized that his opportunities to reach out and talk were really limited because of um, the way society is with men. Like they're supposed to hold it in. They're not
Hmm.
supposed to talk. They're supposed to be strong. We're women. We're more vulnerable. For us, talking is a lot easier. So I want to break down those walls for men and say, you know what, it's okay. And this is one of the things when I work with my clients, I say to them all the time. It's like it's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
It is okay. Like, we have this perception that we have to be happy all the time and everything has to be great, and it doesn't. You can have bad days. If you have a
Yeah.
day where you feel like, "I can't get out of bed. I don't wanna do anything. I need to just stay in bed all day," then you take that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You take that day and you stay in bed, but you know what? The next day you get out
Yeah.
and you rise above it, because it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way.
Yes.
And
I
it's
agree
like,
with you.
yeah, yeah.
I agree with you in that. I always say if you're gonna be somewhere, be present in the moment, and if you're gonna show up, be present. But if
Mhm.
you're not gonna be there 100%, then don't.
Yeah.
Don't be there. If you because you shouldn't get up and go somewhere if you're not gonna really be there. And if you can't allow yourself to be present, then say no. And that's when we start tearing ourselves down. That's when we start breaking down on the inside because I started taking therapy 2 years ago, and my therapist said this to me, and it changed everything for me. He said, "Who told you you had to?" And I was just like, "Nobody. I took all this on my own. I'm the one that decided that I had to." And when I started realizing, and my kids are like, "Why do you say no all the time now?" I said, "I'm practicing. I'm practicing." And I'm like, "You haven't
Mhm.
done anything wrong." And it's not that I don't want you to have certain things. It's that I'm learning to get out of my own way. And I said,
Mhm.
and I don't say no all the time, but I'm not gonna feel bad for saying it. And I'm practicing and I'm learning that I don't have to say yes. And I don't have to always show up. And I don't always have to be there for everybody. I don't have to be that. And when you allow yourself some grace and you allow yourself to fall back, it's okay because you have to heal. And we always have to understand that self-care begins with you because you're the caregiver of all things and you think you have to take on all these things, but who's
Mhm.
taking care of you? And
Yes.
when you break down, nobody can take care of you better than you take care of yourself. So now what?
Mhm.
And I learned that the hard way. And so that's what I love about doing these shows when we have people come on that tell their stories. They may not be the same, but there's always something that resonates with, oh, wow, I totally get that. I've been there. I felt that way. I love what they said about that. And so, again, I thank you so much for sharing your story
Mhm.
because there have been days that I know somebody has been where you are. And when
Mhm.
you speak to the men, definitely, because men have this stigma of I'm a man and I've got to be this person that's made of steel. Well, that's great and all. But at the end of the day, we need the man to be there. But if you are boggled down with all these stresses and cares and worries, you're that's why their health insurance is more
Mhm.
because they're dying faster because they internalize everything. They don't have an outlet. And
Mhm.
they do commit suicide at higher rates
Yep.
because no one understands what they're going through. and they don't turn to anyone because they feel like, well, I need to be strong. I need to be there. But then they're missing out of the household because they don't have anyone to turn to. So they remove themselves, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so
Yeah.
we've gotta be the backbone to those men. We've got to encourage them. We've got to uplift them, and we've got to let them know that we are here for them. And sometimes, and I know for myself, I just unload on my husband. "Ugh," and then I'm like, you don't ever talk to me. And he's like, I guess I don't ever get opportunities. I'm the one that's pouring out.
Mm-hmm.
But and so I started learning that, oh, wow, I've got to give him that opportunity because I almost lost him in 2019. He had a aneurysm in his heart and he had to have open
Mm-hmm.
heart surgery. And I started realizing it was a lot of things that we had taken on and that we were going through when I vent and he doesn't. He's still trying to be the man and be strong and carry things on when he doesn't have an outlet. And I felt bad behind that. I'm like, wow, you didn't have to carry that alone. We're in this together
Mm-hmm.
and so now I try to be mindful of that and not to make him understand that he's not carrying this burden alone. We have a combined effort in what we do
Yes.
together. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate and applaud you for putting men first in this mental health awareness. And
Mm,
and I'm an advocate for mental health. So and I'm an advocate for men. So thank you
yes.
for putting
Yes.
that to the forefront.
Thank you. Well, thank you
Um,
for providing this platform. Like
absolutely.
uh, it's a lot easier for someone to come on, and listen to a podcast than it is, to sometimes go and ask for help. So sometimes just being able to hear the right message, like I said, the right place at the right time, you'll hear the right message. So this is what platforms like this provide. So I'm so grateful for people like you who are doing the work as well. So
Thank you. And I'm going to tell you, you said you feel like we all have a purpose. You're absolutely right. And that is what this is built on because I believe
mhm.
we're all created with a purpose. And that's how I end my show. But before we do that, how do we get to work with you, get to hear you speak? Where are you at? What are your platforms that you're on? Tell us about it so we can reach out to you and get more connected with you.
You can find me on Facebook, of course. I'm on all the kind of normal platforms. Facebook, you can find me Charlene Madden, speaker. Ignite Your Life, which you can see my background here. That is my workshop that I now host because I've created my own workshop. Last year we were completely virtual, so it's fantastic. I could get a bigger reach out there. So you can follow me at Ignite Your Life on Facebook as well. Same handles on Instagram, and I'm trying to do TikTok. We'll see how that works. I will always say I am not yet am I technologically savvy, but I'm trying to get rid of that limiting belief that I'm not, and I'm going to master it one day. So, and I always say one message I always like to leave on is that I want people to know, um, like I get people that message me quite often on social media, and I always tell people that if you're in a dark place and if you're feeling alone, message me. Message me at any time, day or night, and I will come and I will sit in the dark with you if you're in a dark spot. And I will sit with you as long as we need to, but I will lift you up and help you step into the light because together we can do great things, right? So I just don't want anybody to feel like they're ever alone. And, I'm someone that you don't know, which is sometimes makes it a little easier to reach out to people because it's not, you're not telling a friend, you're not telling a family member. And of course, I keep anybody who reaches out is kept in the strictest of confidence. So, and if you want to reach out, there's so many avenues now digitally to reach out. There's support groups online. There are numbers that you can call. If you don't want to use your own name, you call and use Charlene Madden as your name. I don't care. But reach out if you're feeling like you're in a dark spot. Don't stay there alone because you don't have
Amen. Thank you. So I want to ask you one more question. If you could go back to that little girl that's in that scary dark place, what would you tell her?
to. It's funny because I've done this work and it's always kind of chokes me up when I think of it. I don't want to say I would tell her it's going to be okay because that just reinforces the message that everyone told me. But that's always the message that comes into my head is that you are going to be okay. It's like you're strong. You're going to get through this. Just love yourself, right? If I could go back and I always say if I could, I talk to the person I was 5 years ago, but I also like to talk to the person I was 20 years ago. And if that was one message that I could give myself 20 years ago, it would be like, you need to love yourself first because self love will change everything. So,
Amen. Thank you, sister. All right. Well, my takeaways: learning to love yourself. What about you?
mm, yep.
Ask yourself, what about you?
Hmm.
Are you important enough? Stop letting fear control your life. Number one, love yourself. Number two, what can I do to show myself love?
Yes.
It's important.
Yes, it
It's
is.
very important because we were all created with a purpose. No matter what
Hmm.
we're going through, no matter what we're feeling, no matter how lost we are, no matter what dark place we might be in, there is light, there is
Hmm.
hope, and we can find that. And there is a peace that surpasses all understanding. Hold on.
Hmm.
Don't give up. Whatever you're planning, know that God already has a plan for you, a plan and a purpose for your life. And that is to prosper you and not to harm you. So don't give up and don't give
Right.
in. Keep holding
Mhm.
on
That's right.
because good things are coming to you. Now, thank you for watching this show. I'm telling you, things are getting better. It's getting better. Continue to watch the lives. Continue to listen to the podcast. Continue to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Continue to watch the crazy videos and just continue to love yourself because that's the most important thing. But remember, as always, you were created with a purpose. Now get up and go be great. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Charlene, hang out with me while I get us out, okay?
You bet.
Thank you. I'll see you all again soon. Now.